That was worse. Not a spectacle. A demonstration. Something meant to be remembered. Silence, the kind that tells you everyone is watching, and no one is going to step in. "Enjoy this," he said, turning the worn leather between his fingers as if it disappointed him. "You don't get many second chances in life." A few people shifted. One man near the bar let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. I didn't move. He didn't need to raise it higher. The people who mattered were already paying attention. "Let me be clear," he continued, voice controlled, measured. "This is what happens when someone mistakes potential for value." Someone looked down at their glass. No one disagreed. "My name is Ilara Vance. I'm 39 years old, and in that moment, I wasn't his daughter. I was an example." "Richard," a woman murmured. "Careful. Maybe this isn't, it is." He cut in, not loud, but final. "People need to understand something. The world doesn't reward intention. It rewards results." Then, quieter, "I gave you opportunities," he said, looking at me now. "You chose not to take them." Lillian stood beside him. Her expression softened into something that passed for sympathy. "Oh, Ilara," she said gently, "you really shouldn't have come like this." "Like what?" "Like someone who didn't belong." I stepped forward just enough to take the wallet, but he held it for a second longer. "Tell me," he said, almost conversational now. "What exactly did you expect tonight to be?" I met his eyes. "I thought," I said evenly, "you might still recognize me." Something flickered across his face. Gone just as quickly. "Recognition," he replied, letting go at last. "Has to be earned." A quiet ripple moved through the table. I closed my fingers around the wallet. He still thought this room belonged to him. Behind him, a chair shifted softly against marble. One person wasn't looking away. And the way he was watching me made something very clear. This wasn't finished. Stories like this don't belong to one family alone. They repeat themselves, quietly, in different rooms, under different names. This story is created by the author of Revenge Pulse for reflection and inspiration, not to depict any one real individual. If he already believed I had nothing, what was he going to do when he realized what I actually controlled? Once, I was just the daughter who never quite measured up. Daniel closed another deal today, my father would say at dinner, not even looking at me. At his age, that's rare. Daniel would shift in his chair, uncomfortable, but he never corrected him, never said. Ilara did well too. I learned early what I was in that house: a comparison, a disappointment, a line item that never returned value. You think too slowly. My father told me once, tapping a report I had spent 3 nights finishing. In this world, hesitation costs money. I wasn't hesitating. I said. I was checking the risk. He didn't even consider it. "Risk," he repeated, almost amused. "People who succeed don't hide behind it." Lillian leaned in beside him, her tone soft. "She just doesn't have your instinct. Richard, not everyone does. Not everyone belongs." That was the part she didn't say. The mistake that ended everything wasn't even mine. A projection I flagged, a deal I advised against. They moved forward anyway. It failed. And somehow, that became my lesson. "This is exactly what I mean," he said, dropping the report in front of me. "You think small? You act small. And this is where it leads. I told you the exposure was wrong." I said, my voice tighter now. "And yet, here we are." He replied, "Because you don't understand how this works." Daniel looked at me then. Just for a second. Then he looked away. That was answer enough. That night, my father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're done here," he said. Calm. Final. "I'm not going to fund failure." Lillian crossed her arms lightly. "It might be good for her," she added, "to see how the real world works." No one stopped him. No one asked me to stay. At the door. I waited, just long enough to be sure. "Don't come back," he said, "unless you're worth something." I left with one bag and no plan. There were months I questioned whether it was worth it, not because I couldn't learn, but because no one expected me to. And that was when I understood something clearly. He hadn't lost a daughter. He had written off a bad investment. My first job wasn't impressive. Back office, data cleanup, the kind of role no one notices unless something breaks. "Just flag inconsistencies," my supervisor said, sliding a stack of distressed loan files across my desk. "We're not fixing anything, just tracking damage." I nodded. Then I read everything. Not just the numbers, the patterns behind them. Why things failed mattered less than who benefited when they did. Still here, a senior analyst asked one night, passing my desk close to midnight, "I want to understand where the system breaks." I said. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then stop looking at losses," he said. "Look at who gets control when they happen. That changed everything. Distressed assets weren't failures. They were opportunities if you knew where to stand." I started tracing what happened after the collapse, who stepped in, who quietly took control. Not loud names, not public faces. The ones no one noticed until it was too late. I moved firms, built connections, took risks I would have avoided before and paid for some of them. Not every move worked, but enough did. Eventually, I stopped working for other people. The fund didn't carry my name. Not publicly. It didn't need to. We didn't chase success. We positioned ourselves where failure created leverage. I could still feel the edge of the wallet in my hand, sometimes the same thing he used to measure my worth. "Why this bank?" one of my partners asked during a late review. I didn't look up from the file, because it won't survive without help. And the people offering help will decide what survival costs. "I like the structure," I said simply. He gave a faint smile. "That's usually when control changes hands." I approved the facility, signed off on the terms, set the conditions. At the time, it was just another decision, another calculation. I didn't know the system I had just positioned myself inside was the one my father believed he controlled. That was the thing about people like this, they didn't stay uncomfortable for long. They adjusted, redirected, moved on. Richard Vance thrived in that. Now, he continued smoothly, as if nothing had happened. "Let's talk about something that actually matters." A few polite laughs followed, glasses lifted again. The rhythm returned to him. "The bank," he said, gesturing toward Marcus, "has gone through what some would call temporary pressure. Liquidity tightening," Marcus corrected. "Exactly," my father said, pleased. "And yet, we structured one of the most efficient recovery facilities I've seen in years." He let that sit. "The smartest recovery structure." He added, "Flexible capital, strategic oversight, no unnecessary exposure." People leaned in. This was the language they respected. Not many institutions could have secured terms like that. Someone said, "No," my father replied, a hint of pride slipping through. It required the right negotiation and the right partner. Marcus didn't smile, but he didn't contradict him. I stood just outside the table, my fingers resting lightly against the leather of my wallet, listening to my father describe a system he believed he controlled. Access to capital, stability under pressure, protection against downside. Every word correct, every conclusion wrong. He understood the deal on paper. He didn't understand who it was written for, and he didn't understand who was sitting in the room. "That doesn't make sense," someone murmured quietly near the far end. "Those terms sound layered." Across the table, Daniel had gone still, not visibly, but I saw it. He wasn't listening anymore. He was reconstructing. "You said flexible capital," he said carefully, with conditional triggers. My father glanced at him. "Standard." And "oversight external." Daniel pressed. "Technical." Richard replied. "But nothing intrusive." Marcus's gaze shifted. Just slightly. Daniel leaned back, slower this time, not relaxed, calculating. I said nothing, because the truth didn't need help. It was already in the room. My father lifted his glass. To resilience. A quiet chorus followed. To resilience. I didn't raise mine, because I knew something he didn't. The system he was celebrating was never his. And the person he was thanking was standing a few feet away, watching him take credit for a structure he didn't understand. When he finally looked at me again, there was no recognition in his eyes, only dismissal, only certainty. And that was when it settled completely, when he spoke about the person who saved him. He had no idea he was talking about me, but he wasn't listening anymore. I could see it in the way his fingers rested against the table still, but tense. His eyes weren't following the conversation. They were somewhere else, running numbers, rebuilding structure, replaying details he hadn't missed, just hadn't understood. When the discussion shifted, he moved, not toward my father, toward me. "Ilara," he said quietly, stopping just close enough that no one else would hear. "I need to ask you something. I didn't turn fully. You already are." His jaw tightened. "That facility, the one he's describing, it's not standard." "No," I said. "It isn't. I've seen something like it before." He continued. "Layered covenants, control sitting behind liquidity instead of equity." I said nothing. He studied my face. "Searching. I pulled internal summaries last week." He went on. "There's a holding entity behind the credit line. Not public, not traceable through normal channels." A pause. The naming structure. It's familiar. That almost made me smile. Almost. "What kind of name?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "The kind someone uses when they don't want to be found, but still want control." Now I turned to look at him. "And you think that someone is me?" "I think," he said carefully, "that if I'm right, then everything he's been saying tonight is wrong." There it was, not certainty, but the beginning of it. I tilted my head slightly. "And if it is me," he didn't answer right away, because the question wasn't about truth. It was about consequence. "I should have listened to you back then," he said, almost under his breath. That landed harder than anything else. Then, quieter. "If this is true, this isn't just a dinner?" "No," I said. "It isn't." His eyes flicked toward our father, still talking, still confident. Then back to me. Something shifted. Not loyalty. Not yet. But doubt. Deep enough to matter. "If this is true," he murmured. Then he met my eyes fully. Then none of this room belongs to him anymore. It started with a chair, a soft scrape against polished marble barely noticeable unless you were paying attention. I was. Marcus Hale stood. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to interrupt the flow of the room. My father paused mid-sentence, glass still in hand. "Marcus," he said, a faint edge creeping in. "Something to add." Marcus adjusted his cuff slowly, deliberately. His expression was neutral, but his attention wasn't on Richard. It was on me. "Actually," he said, "there is." The room quieted again. Not the same silence as before. This one was sharper, more aware. My father gave a short, controlled smile. "By all means." Marcus didn't return it. Instead, he inclined his head slightly in my direction. "Ms. Vance." The name landed differently this time. Formal, intentional, recognizing. People turned, not with amusement, with curiosity. My father didn't react immediately, but I saw it. The flicker. "What exactly is this?" Richard asked, tone tightening. "We were in the middle of I'm aware," Marcus said calmly, "which is why this matters. Matters how my father pressed." Marcus shifted his gaze to him. Steady. unhurried, the assumptions being made in this room. A pause. Then I would be careful who you describe as having no value. The air shifted. Not visibly, but enough. I've seen her work before, Marcus added quietly. You just didn't know you were dealing with her. My father let out a short breath, half laugh, half dismissal. Marcus, I think you're over. You don't understand. Marcus said, this time, no softness. Silence fell, complete. No one laughed. Marcus held his gaze. Unblinking. You don't understand who you're talking to. That was his strength, and his blind spot. I think we're losing perspective here, he said, setting his glass down with controlled precision. Marcus, if this is about a misunderstanding, it isn't. Marcus replied, no hesitation, no space to redirect. The shift in tone was subtle, but final. Marcus stepped forward, addressing the room now not just my father. The recovery facility your bank accepted, he said, is not a standard capital injection. A few heads turned. Someone lowered their glass. It's structured to stabilize short-term pressure, he continued. But the real control sits behind it. Richard frowned. That's hardly unusual. On its own. Marcus agreed. No. A pause. But combined with covenant control tied to those instruments, it changes who actually holds authority. The room stilled, not confused, listening. That doesn't make sense. Someone murmured quietly. Marcus didn't look at them. Whoever holds that position, he went on, doesn't just provide liquidity. They define the conditions under which that liquidity continues to exist. Daniel spoke before my father could. That's not just funding, he said. That's control. Marcus inclined his head. Exactly. Lillian shifted beside Richard, her composure thinning. I'm sure all of this is outlined clearly in the agreement, she said. There's nothing unusual about oversight clauses. Daniel turned to her. There is when those clauses sit above operational authority, he said. When they can override internal decisions. My father's expression hardened. You're both overcomplicating this, he said. We negotiated favorable terms. That's all. This is manipulation, he added, sharper now. You're twisting structure into control. No, Marcus replied. You signed it. Silence. Daniel looked at me again. This time, there was no hesitation. The entity behind the facility, he said, voice steady now, uses a layered holding structure, the naming conventions, the jurisdiction, the timing. He exhaled. It matches her. The word landed. Her. Lillian's eyes flicked toward me. Something unsettled breaking through. That's absurd, she said quickly. She wouldn't even know how to access something like that. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The room had already begun to understand. Richard hadn't, or refused to. This is speculation, he snapped. Nothing more. Marcus met his gaze. No emotion, no concession, just certainty. The person funding your survival, he said quietly, decides when it ends. It shifted, turned, and settled somewhere my father had never allowed it to go before. On him. Richard straightened, adjusting his jacket as if that alone could restore control. Enough, he said, not loud but firm. We're not turning this into a spectacle. No one responded. That was new. His gaze moved to me, measured now, controlled, different. Ilara, he said, the name sounding unfamiliar. If there's been a misunderstanding tonight, there hasn't. I replied. A brief pause. He nodded once, recalibrating. Then let's not continue this in front of everyone, he said. You're still family. The word landed strangely, not because of what it meant, because of when he chose to use it. Lillian stepped in smoothly. Of course she is, she said warmly. This is still her home. It almost worked. Almost. My father reached for the empty chair beside him, the one at the center of the table. He pulled it back, a small gesture, deliberate. "You should be sitting here," he said. Not an apology, an adjustment. Around us, the room watched, waiting, to see if this could be smoothed over, contained, repackaged into something acceptable. I looked at the chair, the same place I was never meant to have, the same space he spent years teaching me I didn't deserve, and now he was offering it back, not because he understood, because he was beginning to worry. "Ilara," he said again, quieter now. "Sit." I didn't move. Because this wasn't about belonging. It never had been. And the fact that he thought it was told me everything. I kept my eyes on the chair, then lifted them to him. He was waiting for me to accept something he still believed he owned. I didn't sit, because I understood something he didn't. He thought this was about family. It wasn't. It was about power. It settled, like something heavy finally finding where it belonged. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "The facility your bank accepted," he said, addressing the room, "is controlled by a single primary creditor." My father let out a short breath, almost amused. "We've already been through this. That creditor is Ilara Vance." Marcus finished. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. You could feel it moving through the room, slow, undeniable. "That's not possible," Richard said immediately. "She doesn't have the capital, the structure, or she has all three." Marcus cut in. "And the authority that comes with them." My father turned to me then, not dismissive anymore. Searching. For the first time that night. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you're behind this." I didn't answer. Because I didn't have to. Marcus placed his phone on the table and activated the call. "Adrian," he said. A calm voice came through the speaker. "I'm here. This concerns the Vance restructuring facility," Marcus said. "Confirm control and covenant position." A pause. "Then primary creditor authority is held by Ms. Ilara Vance." Adrian confirmed. "She maintains covenant oversight and conditional enforcement rights." The words landed clean, precise, final. "What kind of enforcement?" someone asked. Adrian didn't hesitate. "In the event of a triggered breach, the creditor may suspend funding, initiate a liquidity freeze, and request immediate board-level intervention." A ripple moved through the room. "If funding is withdrawn," he added, "the institution would face immediate solvency risk." That was the part that mattered. My father's hand tightened on the table. "You're exaggerating," he said, but the certainty was gone. "No single structure carries that level of—" "This one does," Marcus said. "No room left, no argument left." Daniel stepped back slightly, not dramatically, just enough to distance himself from what was collapsing. Lillian didn't speak. She couldn't, because there was nothing left to reshape. My father looked at me again, and this time he understood. Not everything, but enough. The room wasn't his. The deal wasn't his. The control was never his. His voice, when it came, was quieter than I had ever heard it, stripped of authority, stripped of certainty. "What do you want from me that was new?" For as long as I could remember, my father had been the center of every room he entered, the one people deferred to, the one who decided outcomes before anyone else could speak. Now he was waiting, for me. I didn't answer immediately, because this moment wasn't about speed, it was about control. "You don't lose the bank tonight," I said. A ripple moved through the table. Not relief, uncertainty, but you don't control it anymore. His jaw tightened. He didn't argue, because he knew. "You will step back from all signing authority tied to the facility." I continued, effective immediately. Marcus didn't react, which meant it was already done. "There will be a board-level review," I added. "Independent." Lillian found her voice. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You don't get to walk in here and rewrite I already did. I said. She stopped, because she knew I had. You won't be involved in financial decisions, I continued, looking at her. Not directly, not indirectly. Her expression shifted. Not anger. Loss. Daniel stepped forward slightly. She's right. He said, there's no version of this where things go back. That landed harder than anything else. My father didn't look at him. He was still watching me, waiting for something more. An apology. A way back. I turned the wallet in my hand once. The same worn leather. The same object he had used to define me. I placed it on the table in front of him, carefully. You were right, I said. The room stilled. Some people don't get a second chance. Hope flickered across his face, brief, fragile. Then I held his gaze and let the truth land. But this time, my voice stayed quiet. It's not me. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't deciding my worth. I was deciding his. No one spoke. No one moved. And in that silence, my father finally understood what it meant to be written off. This story is created by the author of Revenge Pulse for educational and inspirational purposes. It reflects familiar social dynamics, not real individuals or events. Sometimes, people don't lose everything in one moment. They lose it slowly through pride, through silence, through the belief that control will always belong to them. And sometimes, the hardest truth isn't failure. It's realizing the person you dismissed was the one holding everything together all along. If this story stayed with you, tell me, would you offer a second chance? Or walk away for good?